ang gagamit, ang sagot is A. Kasi yung
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar 4 on parenting in the light of COVID-19, strengthening family relationships. I'm Carmelita Nuki, the Executive Director of DAWN and the President of the Philippine Migrants' Rights Watch. And I will be your moderator for this afternoon's webinar. As a brief background, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all sectors of society, including migrant women returnees and those in the destination countries displaced from their respective workplaces. A major issue that they are currently confronted with is mental health due to distress and possible trauma brought by the pandemic. Many migrant women workers are forced to return home scarred or trapped in the country of destination, afraid and anxious for their individual welfare and well-being, as well as that of their families. In this regard, DAWN, in partnership with the British Embassy Manila, is organizing series of webinar consultations and trainings starting October 2020 till February 2021. Today's webinar is on parenting in the light of COVID-19, strengthening family relationships. And to formally start our program, let me call on Professor Aurora Habate de Dios, the President of the DAWN Board of Trustees and Senior Project Director of WAGI, for her welcome remarks. Professor Oye, please.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the fourth in a series of webinars organized by DAWN with support of, and the Philippine Migrants Watch, with support from the British Embassy. This is our way of focusing on migrant women workers and trying to extend a helping hand at this very critical time of the pandemic. Specifically in coping with the challenges, both in the when they are in the destination countries and particularly when they return home. As we all know, COVID-19 is quite unprecedented because it has affected most countries in the world today. Previous epidemics affected a few countries and it was short term. But it seems like COVID-19 will stay with us for a longer time. And because of that, tens of thousands of migrants are affected at the destination countries where they are mostly dismissed by their employers due to the economic downturn that these countries are also experiencing. But from this crisis situation in the destination country, they come home to another crisis situation. And that is to say that, one, they are forced to undergo quarantine and wait for longer periods before they can come home. Secondly, the system of transportation has been quite irregular, and there has been a lot of stranded migrants that really do not know how to go home and are forced to stay in the streets or in some institutions where they are being assisted. But for the most part, they're faced with a situation where government has very inadequate assistance, both in monetary terms as well as in services. Although the system has improved somewhat, the procedures have been more efficient in transporting them back to their home provinces. They face another situation where, as I said, the crisis situation in the family presents itself. Unlike before, when they come home and they're welcomed with open arms because they bring in the goodies, they have work that they look forward to back to the destination country. But this time around, they come home empty-handed with no prospect of ever getting back to their work in the destination country. And because many migrant women workers come from very low income domestic types of work, uh, the biggest stress, of course, is coming from their inability to provide for the family as they have been used to doing. Second, because they cannot look forward to sufficient or adequate support from this government, from our government at this time, critical time of the pandemic. And thirdly, that they are faced with the everyday needs of their children, food, medicine, nutrition, and education, which is now has now shifted to digital education. So for all these issues that they face when coming home, how do we as NGOs and civil society assist them to cope with the emotional, psychological, and even economic impact of COVID that they have to face on an everyday basis? And how do we help them to use this opportunity, speaking quite positively, that this opportunity of family togetherness turn into something positive in order to strengthen relationships and in order for them to kind of reinforce each other in hoping for the early solution of the pandemic, as well as a future where they can restart their lives, possibly working at home and not going abroad anymore. So all these questions and issues, I think, will be discussed by our resource person, who are my dear colleagues from Miriam College. They are experts in this field, and I hope that participants can benefit from their perspective as well as analysis, and also for our participants to contribute to the discussion, which I hope, which I know you have a lot of experience as well. So in the name of Dawn, Philippine Migrants' Rights, thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Oyi, for updating the group on the situation of our migrant workers, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic, and for warmly welcoming the participants. So now let's call on Ms. Sophia Hack, the Immigration Liaison Manager of the British Embassy Manila, for her opening remarks. Sophia, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very, very much, both of you, the Deputy President and the President. That's a really great start. Thank you for putting that perspective. And actually, I was just writing as you spoke, because I'll come back to parenting tips and coping with regards to the emotional and the psychological help we can give each other to get through this hard time. So thank you for that. I'm going to keep that in my head and make sure I come back to that. I'm really glad. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today. I'm really pleased and thankful and grateful to be invited this afternoon to speak to you at this virtual event. Fourth in the series, I understand, around sort of psychosocial support for migrant women and returnees and those in destination countries. I'll be talking to you today about parenting in the light of COVID-19 and how we can strengthen our family relationships, especially for those that the President of Dawn has just spoken about who have returned, migrant women who have returned, and a little for those who are still back in the destination countries and where we might be able to give some tips on how we can help to make this, I guess, this challenging times a more positive experience for you. I'm hoping that I can share some of my experience of what I've gone through right at the beginning of the pandemic, especially the first sort of 4 months, and where I am today with my children. But I want to tell you a little bit about myself so that I want to be able to relate to the women on this call and those who may be feeling what I have felt, especially through this pandemic. One, my name is Sophia Hack. I've worked at the British Embassy here in the Philippines for about 2.5 years. I've been here in Manila. I love it and love the hospitality of this country. So thank you. I'm married. I have 3 children. My children are 14, 12, and 7. My husband and I both work full time. Before the pandemic hit, I was traveling a lot. So I know what it's like to be away and then to come back in. And the challenges that that also poses. And I'm sure that the challenges and the struggles that we as working women, or have been working, and managing our children and managing our households is a shared one, and it's a hard one. To say that the pandemic has taken its toll on all of us at some stage with varying degrees is probably an understatement. I think we've all been affected. It's changed the way we live, the way we see things, the way we plan, the way we think about our future. And I guess I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to say something a little bit about what I've done to help me cope with the challenges of looking after my children full time, which I guess in the olden days was what all women did, right? Stayed at home, looked after their children, that was it. But we're living in different times, in changing times, where we are economically active, we have been, and provide for our families. And no doubt the challenges that we now face having come back, where we've lost jobs. So I guess where I really wanted to start was, as women, we are very resilient. COVID-19 will not be our first challenge, and it definitely won't be our last. And it's really just about how we can try and get through this. And as the President said earlier, how we can make this a positive experience. So what are the challenges, or what have the challenges of COVID-19 been for us parents, for us women who are parents? I'm going to share my experience, and hopefully you'll be able to relate to them, taking away, no matter how small it is, but being able to take away something that will make it positive for you. So the first of the challenges, I think, is online learning. For those of us, if we don't have access to online learning, then it's the school packs that I've seen that get sent out to children and them having to sit down. So working with our children, keeping them on track with their schoolwork, whilst running the household, whilst being the cook, whilst being the cleaner, whilst being the wife, whilst being the mum. My sister said to me, whilst being a nurse and the janitor, and she said, if you've got pets, also being the pet nurse as well. So all of those challenges, and keeping your children on track with their learning, as well as social distancing having an effect on that, and also our traditional support networks have been affected at home whilst we're sort of managing all of that. So I guess in the past, if you've got a partner, great, partner comes in and you can have a break and have some breaks. But if you don't have your family and you haven't got your neighbor or your friend who can come because of social distancing, we've lost that support as well whilst we manage the rest of our house. Internet issues for those of us who have to teach our children online. We've got, we're all in one space, all under the same roof. It's relentless. We've got no break in that space, especially in the Philippines, where we've had one of the longest lockdowns in the world. So there's that's putting pressure on us. We then have, for those of you who are still away and not back in the Philippines or back with your children, the option to travel, to see them now and again, especially with Christmas coming up, has gone. The travel restrictions have impacted us all. But with that, even if we did have it as an option, the complications of having to pay for tests and quarantine and self-isolation makes it complex, hard, and actually, because of those costs, it makes a choice of actually saying that we cannot do that travel. So therefore, we're away from the children again, or our families. And I guess for those of you who have recently returned, just as the President said earlier, having possibly lost your jobs, having no money, that uncertainty, that financial uncertainty, alongside not actually being prepared for the pandemic, therefore unexpectedly having to return, dealing with that on a mental, mentally having to deal with that is quite hard, because you're all now back in together. So you've got financial uncertainty, you've got the instability of having to come back unexpectedly, and so you're not prepared, leading to anxiety, depression, being sad. I know at the beginning of the lockdown, we as the British Embassy staff had to return to the UK. And in the first few months, my family was really excited to see me, but I was actually sad. I wanted to be here. This was my home in the Philippines. I wanted to give my children that continuity, but actually couldn't. And that anxiety spread to them as well. They feel it. And I guess also for some of us who have been away and then come back to our families, especially women who are coming back to their children because of the pandemic, you might find that your children have behavioral issues, shy, quiet, reserved, or angry with you because they don't expect to see you at home. They're not used to that, you know, way. Your connection that you might have had with them on the phone or at a distance in person is very different. That you as the mother or as the parent feel familiar with your children, but actually maybe that familiarity on the ground isn't there because you probably haven't seen them in so long. They've grown up, you've missed things. That's the saddest part of it, I guess, about being away. And in that space, there's anxiety, there's sadness, there's difficulty, and I guess feeling you feel let down, feeling guilty, especially as a mother. Feel guilty. I don't think it ever leaves you if you work. You learn to deal with it, but there's that guilt feeling as well. So all of that, I understand all of that. I've had all of that emotion, and just to say, we are not the only ones. All women under this pandemic, all parents are definitely feeling this way. Lots and lots of my friends who you sometimes think may be stronger than you are struggling in that area. So what did I do to cope? How have I coped so that it's now a bit more of a, I guess, a positive experience for us and has become better? Well, I think the first thing I'm going to say to all of you and to myself, which I didn't realize at the beginning, was that we cannot do everything. We cannot be the janitor every single day, and the cleaner, and the cook, and the helper, and the teacher. We can't. It's just not possible. It's not how we've led our lives, and we don't really know how to do 600 things at once. We try to as women. I know we're brilliant at multitasking, but there are, we can't do it all the time, not for a sustained period of time. So I would always say to me, is that we've got to go easy on ourselves a little bit. Actually, we've got to give ourselves a break. And I think that this is a unique situation. Remember, it's a global health emergency that none of us have probably ever experienced. It's unique to us all. We've not been through it. We weren't born knowing how to deal with a pandemic. So it's okay if you didn't clean the bathrooms, if you didn't do the beds, if you didn't make 6 dishes and you only made 1. And it's okay if the children had noodles from a packet one lunchtime, or that they didn't finish their homework today. It's okay. I struggled with that in the beginning. I was hard. I felt like I was angry at my children for not getting through the day and getting their homework on time and not finishing tasks, and realized I'm not only making them suffer, I'm making myself suffer, because we all get angry, upset, sad at ourselves. So actually, it's okay if we don't get everything done every day. And what did I do to help, to do what did I do to try and get through each day over this long period of time? I guess one of the things I have, and I wanted to share with you actually, faith. So you can see I'm a Muslim, I'm a practicing Muslim. My faith means a lot to me. It underlines everything I do. And I know that that will be a similar situation for yourselves. What I will also say though, it doesn't just have to be faith of a religion. It's faith in what you believe in, and what your strengths are, you hold on to. Those are the things more than ever that you need now to help you get through this hard time. So hold on to whatever it is that you believe in, you value, you love, you care, whether that's faith, whether that's music, whether that's yoga, whatever it might be. Hold on to that. I built a routine for my children. I tried to stick to a good routine with them, give them structure. What that does is it's important for children because it helps them know what to expect. It also keeps a balance if you have a bit more structure and routine. It means that you know how the day is going to run, they know how the day is going to run, but it's okay if things drop out and get lost or the time schedule changes, that's okay. As much as you can, I think a routine really does help. So, for example, even now, whilst we're in the Philippines, all of us are up in the morning, 6:30, 7, we're early risers, exercise in the morning for 15 minutes even, 10 minutes even, it doesn't matter. 15 minutes, even if the children watch you do exercise and they're laughing at you and whatever it might be. A little bit of something that gives your mind some freedom from the day's going to bring. Breakfast. And generally, I was going to say to you about breakfast or meals, have them together. In this age of the 21st century, everybody's running. We don't need to run to the office anymore. We're all at home. Sit together, eat your breakfast together, even if, again, it's in front of the TV. Doesn't matter, as long as you're together, and you're sat in one room together. That's the most important thing. The other thing that I found with the school day is, for me, I carried on working. So I structured the school day and my work day together. So when the children had breaks, I would schedule as much as I could my meetings. But when they had a lunch break, I had a lunch break with them. And then after their school finished around 2:30, then I would carry on with my meetings. But to underpin that school day and to carry on, I had a traffic light system. So I had a red, amber, green traffic light system where if I had the red, just a red sheet of paper put up on the door, my children knew that mum was working. And even if the world was going to turn upside down, they were not allowed to talk to me. Doesn't matter what happened in their lives. They couldn't speak to me. But when it was amber, they would be able to, they'd know mum wasn't working, but if they really needed to and they were bursting, they could come and disturb me and talk to me. And the green one, which is their favorite, and I guess mine as well, was the best one, where basically if I had a green poster up on the wall, on the door or the window, then the children could disturb me at any time, no problem. I carried on working, but if they needed me, I was there. That helped me manage actually homework, for example. If the children had homework, then I could help them if they didn't understand something, or they were confused about something, I could help them with their homework. So that helped. I also believe in gadget. I mean, in fact, I wish the iPad and the iPhones and all of these were never, ever invented, because otherwise your children, I feel like they're on them forever. But what we've done is introduced an hour after school where they're not allowed gadgets. So whether that's a phone, whether that's an iPad, whatever it might be, your children may have access to. And if they don't, even better, because if they don't have access to gadget, it means that you play with them. Another thing, I'm not one of those mums that used to sort of sit with the kids and play games with them, but the pandemic taught me to sit down with them, to play Uno, to play Jenga, to play Ludo, to play board games, and sit with them and play. I mean, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, you know, it's hard work because I would much rather do something else, or, you know, you always think about, I'm going to cook or I'm going to do this, but actually make time to sit with them and play with them. All of these things are about togetherness, especially for those of you who have come back to your children, who haven't seen them in a long time and are scared about that relationship. It's sensitive, isn't it? Because they're your children, and whilst you have every right over them, you don't know them because you necessarily haven't been around. So those playing together, eating together, cooking together, even my little one, even, I mean, I don't need him to, but I'll tell him to come and cut a fruit or cut an orange, and, you know, just to help me and spend 5 minutes with me, 10 minutes with me. So we're doing not just schoolwork, and we're not just doing work all the time, but it's something different, and you can play with them, create that bond, rebuild those relationships with your children and your family, not just necessarily your own children, but you'll have your nieces, your nephews, your extended family, whoever, where you can, you know, have those connections by playing together. For those of us who are still far away from our family, I would say to you, it's about connecting through with your family and friends through Zoom or video calls, whatever forum you have access to, speaking to your family regularly, finding out what's going on with them, meal times, as I said, together. And I guess more than anything, be honest with your children about what's going on around. Try to find a simple way to explain to them about the pandemic and its impact, your situation, your uncertainty, your financial situation. They won't always understand. Maybe the older ones will, but the younger ones, I guess, just a reassurance that you're there, holding hands, hugging them, you know, in that regard. And I guess one of the other things that I did do during the pandemic, just to help stop that anxiety level and that sadness about what was going on in the world, I did stop watching the news. I didn't watch it every day, you know, once a week after a while, because it got me down. And the news, you know, 700,000, 500,000 cases, we've become, you know, the UK's hit second in the world or whatever. That used to worry me. So I stopped watching it, and actually said that to a lot of my friends, and found that helped, that we don't feel so anxious when we are watching those things. And I guess for those of us with children where the behaviors become an issue, obviously because of our absence or because you're there all the time and they're not used to it. Most important, I would say, to us, which is what I didn't do in the beginning, is to stay calm. I was shouting at them and it didn't work. It made me upset, made them upset, and just felt like I hadn't done a good job that day as a parent. Staying calm and I guess as I said before, being easy on yourself. Distract your children, redirect them, different games, sit with them. Sometimes I found with my youngest that when he wants attention, actually he just wants my time. So it's to sit with him. Rewarding good behavior. It's okay if they have a sweet now and again. You know, it's okay to give them a lollipop. You know, don't encourage it huge amounts, but, you know, now and again as a reward. And sometimes when our children are messing about or we can't really understand what's going on, sometimes just leave them alone for a while and we can come back to it. What I know in the past is when they're upset and then you're upset, it's just a vicious cycle. So actually you just walk away and leave it for a bit before you return. Those are the different sort of coping mechanisms that I put in place in terms of being able to manage with my children being at home full time. And I guess I would end on some key words or key behaviors we all know about, just sometimes we forget. And I guess the pandemic has exacerbated some of our feelings and therefore we need to be self-check. So being calm, these all help not just your parenting skills, but they help with all of your relationships, I would say. Being calm, being positive, happy here first inside. Once we're happy, and I know you will have issues around financial uncertainty and not being able to provide for your family, but we've got to turn that into a positive. You've got to think about, build your relationship with your children, settle down, then start to think about what your options are moving forward. So trying to work through your own issues will help you deal better, help you be better, less anxious, less stressed, which then the children pick up on and actually will help that relationship with each other. As I said before, eat together. Those are the best times, we all know, sitting together as a family. Even if it's in front of the TV, it doesn't matter. As long as you're together and you're eating together and enjoying a meal together. Have a good routine. And I guess don't be too hard on yourself. And also for us women who have traditionally worked, for those of you who have worked and come back, many of us probably haven't spent 5-6 months in one space with our children. So actually it's really great to be with your children and enjoy that time with them, learn about them, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what makes them excited, you know, what their strengths are and weaknesses are. It's the best time. It might not ever come again, because as soon as the pandemic's over and the vaccine comes in and everything's fantastic, we're all going to go back to our lives and work. So actually this is a time we can really, really enjoy with them. And in the beginning, it doesn't feel like it, but you will get there. So I would always say, be kind to yourself as well, and be happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for your very inspiring sharing. We just heard a sharing from a migrant herself. So I'm sure later on with the other presentations, we will hear more about the experience of our migrant workers and the parents or the mothers, no, who are far away and then their children are here and all that. So thank you very much again, Sophia. So now let's have a group screenshots. Can we request everyone to please put on your videos for our screenshot?
Okay po. Okay. Okay po. 1, 2, 3. Smile. One more pa po. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you everyone. So now let's go to the next part of our program. But let me introduce our two distinguished speakers for this afternoon. First, let's have Dr. Jerry Jurisprudencia, who is a practicing licensed clinical psychologist and licensed guidance counselor. He is an associate professor and former chairperson of the Department of Psychology at Miriam College. As an educator, he was the recipient of the President's Award for Teaching Excellence, the highest Miriam College Award in the tertiary level. He also received recognition from the Center for Educational Measurement, the highest, wait, sorry. Yeah. Dr. J also received recognition from the Center for Educational Measurement and a sought-after resource person. Dr. J was also a board of director of the Psychological Association of the Philippines for a couple of years. He obtained his PhD degree at the Ateneo de Manila University and his Master's of Science in Guidance and Counseling from the De La Salle University. He's an advocate for women and children, a proud father of 2 daughters, and an internal migrant. And our next speaker is Ms. Beatriz Eileen Sison, who is a licensed psychologist and a certified clinical psychologist by the Psychological Association of the Philippines. She's a graduate of the Ateneo de Manila University and has been working with children and families for more than 25 years. She co-authored 2 books with Dr. Maria Lourdes Carandang, The Path to Healing, a primer on family violence, and Nawala ang Ilaw ng Tahanan, a book on families of OFW mothers. She was a contributor to Dr. Carandang's book, The Magic of Play, Children Heal Through Play Therapy. She was part of Dr. Carandang's team for 20 years, where they have done research and implemented interventions program for street children who were abused, involved in substance abuse, those in conflict with the law, children in prostitution, gifted children, families that have experienced physical and sexual abuse, and families of OFW mothers. Ms. Eileen is the past president of the Philippine Association for Child and Play Therapy. She has been practicing play therapy and other forms of expressive arts therapy for children and adolescents who have experienced anxiety, trauma, and others. She also practices psychotherapy and conducts training workshops for professionals, parents and other caregivers, seafarers and their families on trauma and recovery, abuse, suicide and other mental health issues, counseling skills, burnout prevention, and parenting, wellness, and others. Before the pandemic, she had an active private clinical practice at Spark Discovery Center in Makati and Clinica Salutare Inc. in BGC. Aside from doing online consultations, psychotherapy, and webinars, she continues to be the resident psychologist of Cribs Foundation Inc. and a psychotherapist at the Ilaw Center, Wellness Center of Miriam College. She's also a member of the Inter-Country Placement Committee, Inter-Country Adoption Board. She was a consultant to various children's TV programs and market researches involving children and families. And she's married and has 3 children, ages 27, 23, and 19. So now let's have Dr. Jerry Jurisprudencia to have his presentation on migrant worker returnees plus migrant worker women workers and parenting amidst the pandemic. Dr. J, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mel, Professor Oyi, and Ms. Sophia. I would like to thank the British Embassy, represented by Ms. Sophia, for extending their support to Dawn. And we hope that this conference will surely help our women migrant workers and women migrant returnees, as well as practitioners in the field of service. Okay, so may I have my slide, please, Michelle? So before I discuss the topic, let me share with you a real story, okay, from an OFW, a migrant women worker.
Mama! Aron, anak! Uy, kumusta na kayo dyan? Mama, nakita ko po ang pictures mo. Napuntahan mo na di po ang mga napuntahan ng mga artista. Oo, naku, ang ganda-ganda talaga dito, anak.
Badge, baka naman pinapabayaan mo sarili mo dyan.
Hindi naman. Ang bait pa nga po namin eh. Siya yung nagdala sa amin sa mga magagandang lugar.
Talaga? Anong trabaho mo?
Secretary. Kaso lang, sweetie, sorry hindi ko makakapagpadala ng pera kasi pinaprocess may papers ko. Sabi ko sa akin baka next month, baka pwede.
Wala yun. Basta, huwag kang mapapagutom dyan.
Naman, miss na miss ko na kayo. Miss ka na din namin, Mama. Mahal na mahal kayo ni Mama, ha? Huwag niyong kakalimutan yun. Love kita, Mama.
Badge, mahal na mahal ka namin. Tandaan mo yan.
Naku, umiyak sa sunshine. Tsaka kailangan ko na lumpahan kasi kumain na dito. Natawag na lang ako ulit, ha?
Oh, Badge, basta tumawag ka ulit agad, ha? I love you.
I love you. I love you, Mama.
Bay na, kambal. Bay na.
Oh, bilisan mo na pag-eat mo dyan. Naku, pag nakita ka ng mga housemates natin, mababad trip yung mga yun. Ano, wala malungkot dito kasi nakawa sila. Ibabalik pa natin yung mga kalat na niligpit natin. Kunyari, maayos ang tirahan mo ba?
Oo.
Huwag ka malalala. Naku, dating ang araw. Totoo na lahat ang masasabihin mo sa kanila. Naku, pag siwep ka, maging kamukha mo na si Katin.
Grace, na-expire na yung visit visa ko. Halos isang taon na yata yung apply ko trabaho, wala pa rin akong nakuha. Wala na akong pera. Ayoko na umuwi sa amin na wala akong napala. Wala man lang akong may abot sa mag-ama ko. Naisip ko, kung pwede lang, umutang sana ako sa'yo. Pang pamasahe lang papuntang Kish, tsaka pang process ng visa, yun lang. Kahit paglaba, ipaglaba kita, gagawin ko yun. Alam mo namang babayaran kita eh. Makakawala akong na trabaho.
O sige, kasi may konti naman lang may tabi dyan. Mag-iingat ka na, ha?
Salamat, Grace.
Okay. Before I proceed, I would like also to thank our participants. I hope this will be very helpful for you as well, whether you are a service provider or not. No? So I hope whatever you learn here may also be applicable in your life. Okay. So what is the situation here? That was a film based on a real life story of Vageline Tumbaga or Vageline Federico, which was picked up by MMK. Okay, so I don't know if some of you were able to relate to that, especially for many migrant women returnees or many migrant women who are still in the destination countries. Okay. So the situation there right now is very alarming. Okay, why? Because of the percentage of women migrant workers outside of the country. So the statistics show that 51% of our OFWs are women. Okay, so they are both professionals and non-professionals. Okay, so we have almost 3 million women, and half of these are our women migrant workers. Next slide. Okay. And the fact is, of that 50%, another 50% or almost 60% were women working in domestic setting. Okay, so just visualize that kind of number. Okay, so they are not in a professional setting, but more found in homes of employers. Okay, and although they were the biggest number of contributors in the coffers of the government. Okay, according to the Philippine Statistic Authority, they contributed almost 211 billion plus pesos in the economy of the Philippines. And that was 2019. Now, 2020, we were hit by COVID-19, and we are very much affected, as what was mentioned by Professor Oyi last time in the webinar, no? That almost many of these migrant women returnees were not able to receive their salaries, and therefore they had nothing to send back home in their families. Okay, so next slide, please. And to look at the other side, if our women migrant workers are working abroad, so these women can either be single, okay, or single parents, or married, but they are separated from their families, okay, or they were daughters of families who were forced to leave because they simply want to live the economic condition of their families. Now, on the other hand, for married migrant women workers, the effect of this show, if you look at the pie presented in the slide, 53% of women who are family members left children without any other relative assisting or looking for their welfare. So they were simply living alone. Okay? And there are also children who were simply left in the care of their grandparents. Okay? Either from the mother's side or from the father's side. Or some kids who were left in the care of titos or titas, no? Okay, of the father or of the mother. Okay, and 32% show that because it's the woman who left and work abroad, it's the husband or the father who was left behind to take care of the children. So there was the change of gender role in this instance. No? Next slide, please. So this can be very distressing, no? Aside from the fact that they are already sacrificed so much, okay, because of the pandemic, okay, their sacrifices were even more aggravated, no, by the COVID-19 situation. And sad to say, many of them were forced to come back to the Philippines. So just last month, 300 of them came home, okay, either deported or were forced, okay. And not only that, some who left the country had high hopes that they will bring, okay, sunshine to their families, but only to come back with their dreams pinned inside the coffin. No? So that's really very unfortunate. And if you are a family member, if you are a mom, this can really be devastating for family members. Next slide, please. What else is more distressing? So for those who came back, this means a depleted savings. Why? Because they had no hope that the kind of work they left abroad will still be waiting for them. So it's a loss of income. And they are not even sure that even if they are back here in the Philippines, they will find work. Because even in the destination country, many women who got COVID were either thrown in the streets or left, no, in the care of other OFWs with no support, okay, from their families, okay. but themselves. So next slide, please. Another distress is on the side of the family members who were left at home. Okay, so many of their kids, especially those who were left to take care of themselves, both parents were working abroad, no, found themselves isolated. Okay, they had nobody to turn to. Some are even vulnerable to bullying from classmates. Okay, and there are also those, because they were left at home, they were vulnerable to other vices. No? So they are exposed to peer pressure, and they end up getting pregnant because there were nobody to take good care of them. Walang gumagabay sa kanila, no? And they ended up not finishing college. No? I remember there was one OFW, he worked for 10 years. She had 8 children. She didn't come home because she was thinking that by sending money back home, she can send the 8 children to school. And when she came back, not even a single one of them finished college, and all of them got married, and they were still expecting from the mom to support them. And sad to say, the mom had to come home and had no savings at all. Okay, next slide. Another distressing situation faced by our migrant women workers and returnees. Many of their kids, no, are exposed to crime because walang gumagabay, walang kumakalima, tumitingin sa kanila. No? So they are exposed to alcoholism, drugs, and crime. And worse, no, for those parents, so okay, who were with the kids, no, yung kasama na asawa, sometimes the kids ended up getting abused, no, either physically, sexually, or emotionally. So that's an added stress to our family members. Next slide, please. Okay. So what are other parenting distress that our migrant women returnees and migrant workers are exposed to? Communication gap, like what Miss Sophia said. No, it's difficult, especially when you have gone out of the country for a long time. You miss the milestone development of your children, and it's difficult. No, once you are back home, it's difficult to simply get that quality affection from your children. Most of the time, they are indifferent from you. No? So it is not automatic. No? Even how much you bribe them, you give them gadgets, or you bribe them with money, it is not an automatic solution. Okay, so these are the distressing situations that our migrant women returnees are exposed to. Okay, next slide. And so what do parents do? Sometimes they tend to compensate. Okay lang yan kung may pera ka. What if you don't have? That's why some kids would even tell their parents, don't come home anymore if you don't bring lots of money. Because they were thinking that their mom was simply shoveling money abroad. No? They didn't realize the difficulty, the sacrifices that they had to face. And so some kids would end up being so spoiled. No? They had that consumerist mentality, thinking that the value of the family is simply measured by how much money their parents can bring back home. Next slide. Okay. So this is also aggravated by COVID. So if you are a member of the family who is in the destination country, you are so scared. You are so anxious. What's happening in my family? How are they coping with COVID? Or if you are back home, how can we cope, no, with our depleting savings? How can we be sure of the protection that my family will not be exposed? Especially, wala na kong savings kung ma-hospital pa itong anak ko. Where will we get the money? No? Like just the other day, my friend abroad came and sabi niya, they were told, you can pass MIA, you can only get the swab if you pay 7,000. So madali kang lumabas. So 3 hours lang makuha mo ng result. But if you don't have the money, he said, you have to wait for a week fourth or two. So you still have to show that you have money to be able to be tested, whether you have COVID or not. So that can be very stressful for our migrant women returnees if they don't bring money at all. So that's why some women would even opt not to come back if they don't have money to show to their families. Next slide. So as I have said, this is very stressful because the family is forced to separate. No? So they become vulnerable. There's no parent to be there. No? Mag-isa lang. What if the parent also who was left behind is not capable, is not mature? So that can add to the risk that the family is faced with. No? And the worst scenario will be the one who was left behind was also molested by the parent who was left behind. Next slide. So another distressing situation is some children who were left behind were forced to mature fast without even having to want it. No? So tumanda sila agad because they had to take care of their young siblings at the absence of their mother. So they have to take care of their father and other siblings. So, kaya they grow up fast. No? Okay? And the other side of that is, of course, the loneliness that many children experience when parents are not around to look for their welfare. Okay? So, may isang bata, tinanong siya, no? How do you describe your mom? Sabi niya, my mom working abroad, ilaw siya ng tahanan. And then he was asked, what about your tatay? O si tatay, tagapundi ng ilaw ng tahanan. So imagine how descriptive and truthful the picture in the family. Next slide. So what is now the challenge? Why are we here this afternoon? So we are here because we want to help our migrant women returnees and women migrant workers. At the same time, for those who are service providers, we can also enhance or equip ourselves so that if ever we deal with these migrant women, we can also reach out to them. But I think it is not simply to help these migrant women workers to parent through crisis. There can be another crisis in the waiting. It will not be COVID pandemic. It may not be mental health crisis. It can also be parental crisis. Why? Just imagine, no? Many kids are growing up with the absent parents. And we have them here in the Philippines. Sinong gumagabay? And they will become adults. And they can become problems of society as well. So what are we faced with? So this can be another parenting crisis in the making if we are not able to address the mental crisis that is already there knocking at our doors. Next slide. So what is parenting style? So tinatawag natin ito sa Tagalog, gabay. Paano natin gabayan ang ating mga anak? Who is our parental model? Sad to say, many of us grew up, became parents without even knowing whom to use as our models. No? And the only model we know are the nearest model, our very own parents. Ikun sila rin, kulang din sila. No? Kasi they were not also guided by their own parents, then that becomes a problem. No? We cannot give what we do not have. So anong ipapasa natin sa atin mga anak? No? Ikun wala ka pa, you are absent. So where will our kids get that skill? Where will they learn it if nobody is there to help and show them what it is to be a parent someday? Next slide. So what is expected from us? So it's good that we also have the pandemic. No? Why? So what is the pandemic telling us? Tingnan nyo ang nangyayari sa COVID. If we are exposed without taking protective measures, then our probability of getting sick is also high. No? But if we have at least some protective measures like masks or gloves or vaccine, then we can more or less control, okay, the spread of the virus. Now, this is a very good metaphor in like manner. So, because we don't have any model at all. So if a parent becomes a parent in the future and he does not know the skills that he needs to become a parent, definitely he is simply not only exposing himself and his family to danger, but he can be a danger himself or herself. Kaya at least this webinar, no, we have some measures to assist our migrant workers so that they can look at themselves, or for those service providers, so that they will also be able to give some tools as to how to strengthen our parents who might be either coming home or be staying in the destination country. So what positive parental skills will be the learning this afternoon? Okay, next slide, please. Now, to be a parent is not easy. Okay? Ang pagiging isang magulang ay hindi madali. There is no such thing as an overnight parent. Tatlong element dyan. No? Parent, ano ang pagiging isang magulang? Marami dito marunong magkaanak o nagbibigay ng anak. So that is what you call a biological parent. Kaya may tinatawag tayong may anak sa labas, may anak sa loob. No? So you are able to beget children. But it does not necessarily mean that because you can beget children, you are a biological parent, then you can be a good role model. Why? Because a parent and parenthood are two different things. Okay? There are those who cannot even beget a child. No? So nag-adapt sila. Now what is parenthood? Parenthood is, are you a provider? No? Can you provide the basic necessities of your family, like food, shelter, clothing? So you can be a parent, nanganganak ka, pero you fail to be a good provider, which happens in many families in the Philippines. May pera ka nga, okay. So, pero hindi mo naman natustusan, no? So you can be a good provider, but you are an absent parent, no? Now, it's another thing to be to parenting, because parenting is a process. We call this gabay. No? So paano mo gabayan ang pamilya mo? And dito na pumapasok ang parenting style ng mag-asawa. No? Kasi baka salungat ang parenting style ng bawat isa. Ang parenting style ng husband is different from the parenting style of the mother. Because ang parenting means, paano mo gabayan na maging responsible ang anak mo from the moment of birth until he becomes or she becomes an adult. So that's a totally different ball game. No? So you can be a good provider, but you are absent from your family. So hindi mo pa rin sila maggabayan. Okay? And being a provider does not mean that your children will become competent adults in the future, because this is totally a different reality. Kaya the challenge, there is no secret formula for parenting. Paano mo gabayan ang mga anak mo? Okay? So, being a parent, you know what is parenthood and parenting. Okay? So, next slide, please. Now, the challenge is because our kids are growing. May iba-iba silang stages of development. No? Ang paggabay ng magulang sa isang bata ay different sa paggabay ng isang magulang sa lumalaking bata. At ang paggabay ng isang magulang sa teenager. O ang paggabay ng isang magulang sa binata. Okay? O ang paggabay ng magulang sa mga anak na irresponsable na hanggang ngayon, 40 years old na, sa bahay pa rin nakatira ng kanyang mga magulang. So, this is really the challenge of many parents. Okay? How will I handle and manage? Because in every aspect of development, you are expected to, okay, deliver differently. And according to Carl Jung, no, you don't make a child a grown-up by simply saying the word, the magic word, o lumaki ka na, you are a competent adult. No, because you really have to show the way. No? If your kid is a child, perhaps you lead the way. But if your kid is growing up, perhaps you walk side by side with your kid. But if your kid is a grown-up, then perhaps it's time for you to follow your child. So you see, in every stage and aspect, the challenge is there. So you really have to be psychologically be flexible. Okay, you cannot simply be a fixed parent. Okay, because in every stage there is a different challenge and demand. Next slide. Okay, so according to Madeline Levine, okay, what is the challenge? Because there is no perfect model for a parent. Okay, perhaps that will be discussed by my colleague later. And according to her, she gave this metaphor of Goldilocks. No, okay. Alam kong hindi ito Goldilocks na restaurant, ha? Okay. Many of you are familiar with the story of Goldilocks. No, a little girl who was lost in the forest. Okay, at nakita niya yung bahay ng tatlong oso. Okay? So, nang pumasok siya, gutom siya, at gusto siyang kumain. And may nakita siyang tatlong plato doon. No? Ang isa, very hot. Ang isa, very cold. Ang isa, just right. Now, according to Levine, to be a parent, we also have to find what's best at this particular stage of my child's life. What's best at this particular stage in my child's adolescent life. Okay? And each parent, okay, has to find that formula for herself, because there is no such thing as a magical or given formula. No? Minsan mag-aaway pa ang mag-asawa kasi ang style ng isa na asawang lalaki is totally different from the style of the mother. Next slide. So this is where you parents, no, the migrant women worker and the left behind parent had to come together, had to meet halfway and finding the right balance, because this can be a dilemma. There are so many parents who are left behind who became a helicopter parent, overprotective. Kasi ayaw nilang sisihin sila ng kanilang mga asawa who were working abroad kung ano mangyari. So they become so overprotective that they don't give their children the opportunity to decide for themselves. They just have to spoon feed them all the time. Others also are too extreme. They don't want to get involved. Okay, ayaw nilang masisi, so ayaw na silang take the risk. Okay, and so, but as a parent, you cannot just leave this to chance. Okay, and this is very, very critical, especially for children whose both parents are not present. No? So how can you find the balance for them? At least sa iba, may mga grandparents pa. Okay? Ang iba, may isa pang tito or tita who can be there for them. No? I remember there was one mother, migrant woman mother who was crying. Sabi niya, Dr. J, how come ang anak kong 6 years old, pag ako umalis, she would just say, bye-bye, mommy. Pero pag ang yayang umalis, iniiyakan. Yaya, huwag kang umalis. I want to follow you. So sabi niya, nakakasama ng loob. Bakit iniiyakan ang yaya pag umalis pero ako hindi? And then I asked her, what do you think is the answer? And she said, because I was not there. I had no time to spend with her. So the kid became closer to the yaya. So can we say that we blame the kid for being close to the yaya? Because it was the yaya who was available for her. No? And the same thing is true with many grandparents. Kaya na-notice niyo, no? Pag wala kayo, they don't mind kasi nasanay sila sa lolo at lola. Pero kung nandyan kayo, they don't care at all. Kaya pag ang lolo or lola ang nawala, you can see how they were affected. Kaya finding the balance is really the challenge for many parents, especially if you are not around. Next slide, please. So now, ano ang mga estilo ng paggabay? Okay. So iba-iba, may apat na estilo, no? Ang iba, they became authoritative, okay? So what is an authoritative parent? You set rules. You discuss the rules for the child and then let the child decide, okay? Or you can become an authoritarian, no? Martial law, okay? Order lang lahat. Gawin mo ito, gawin mo yan. Without allowing the kid to do things for herself. Or you can become permissive. You just allow things without boundaries at all. No? Okay? Wala nang boundary. They can just do anything, even if you are around, even if they step on your toes. Or you simply turn your back. And most of the time, the parent is authoritarian when the father or the mom comes home. What happens? No? The mom would overcompensate kasi absent siya. So he would spoil the kids. And so the parent left behind became the contrabida because now the mom who just came home wants to appear nice and goody-goody to children. So that becomes difficult, harder for a parent left behind to manage the kids. Okay? So find your style. Ano bang style ko? Am I the authoritative parent? Am I the authoritarian parent who simply order? Or am I the neglectful parent? I will just send them money and then it's up to them, no? to spend it. Bahala na si Batman. Okay? Or I will just let them spend. Kung wala silang pera, magugutom sila. Next slide. So, and what is the impact of this to kids? If you are the authoritative parent, then you know that the kid becomes cooperative as well. Kasi alam niya ang kanyang boundaries. Alam niya what is expected, what's the consequences. If you are the authoritarian parent, the child becomes passive. Why? Because everything will be dependent on the parent. Okay? She will just simply wait. She will not move until the parent says so. Or if you are the permissive parent, you expect that the child becomes rebellious. Why? Because she has no rules. She has no boundaries. She will just do whatever she wants. No? Okay? So you have to ask yourself, ano bang style ko? Is style working with my partner in life? Can we discuss this? Can we talk about this? How will our children see our parenting style and how can we assist and make our family closer, especially in this time of the pandemic? Next slide. Okay. So what is expected from the parent? To be ideal is really very difficult. But the bottom line there is your unconditional love, both of you, no? The male parent and the mother. Okay, both of you had to show unconditional love. But in that unconditional love, you also have to be resilient and flexible. No? Okay, so depending on the kind of age your child is, okay, so many of the parents would find it difficult. So should I be too harsh? Should I simply be appreciative? Should I tell my children to be respectful? Or should I cultivate their independence? Okay. So these are the challenges. But below that, the underlying element for both parents is at least your kids will know that you love them. Okay. Next slide. So how will you communicate to your kids? How will you make your kids listen, for example? So do you give alternatives? Okay. So for some parents, they just want their kids to follow and no alternatives at all. They would just say, don't run. But what is it exactly when you say don't run? Should I stay put? Should I sit down? What exactly you mean is please walk. Okay. Or don't yell. When exactly what you mean is, can you please quiet your voice? So what alternative do you give? No? And sad to say that parents are not also aware of this because this is also what was passed on to them. So unless they had to relearn parenting styles and reevaluate what is effective for them right now, then they will realize that they are losing the battle with their children or they will become separated from their kids. No? What is important here is that parents should show and provide emotional stability. So where will the kids get emotional stability if one parent is not around? So the assumption is the parent who is left behind is supposed to give that emotional stability. But what if she is not also capable because you cannot give what you do not have? Then that becomes the problem. And that is what can be society's problem as well in the near future. Next slide. So one important element in any stage of the child's development is the kind of words that we say to our kids, whether she is a toddler, whether she is a child, whether she is an adolescent, or she is already a young adult. Because for every word that we say, it begets feelings. Okay? And for whatever feelings it produces, it develops into emotional states. So if the words that we say are negative, okay, are hurting, then expect that what will remain will be the feelings of resentment, the feelings of hostility, the feelings of anger. No? So like what Ms. Sophia said, so you have to be very careful with how you communicate, okay, to your kids or even to one another, husband and wife. How do you say things to each other? Okay. Anong sabi noon ng isang commercial? No? Ang nakikita ng mali sa ginagawa ng matatanda ay nagiging tama sa mata ng bata. So if the parents themselves don't show the kind of example, then the kids will end up like their parents too. Okay? So next slide. So let me share this with you. This is an experiment done by a Japanese, okay? And we hope this will help us realize the importance of our words.
The stream.
Dr. Emoto has conducted another interesting experiment. He placed rice into 3 glass beakers and covered it with water. And then every day for a month, he said, "Thank you" to one beaker. "You're an idiot" to the second. And the third one, he completely ignored. After a month, the rice that had been thanked began to ferment, giving off a strong, pleasant aroma. The rice in the second beaker turned black, and rice that was ignored began to rot. Dr. Emoto thinks that this experiment provides an important lesson, especially with regard to how we treat children. We should take care of them, give them attention, and converse with them. Indifference does the greatest harm.
Thank you, Abhishek.
Sorry.
Okay. Now, what did we learn from this experiment? These scientists used the same variety of rice. Okay? One variety of rice for 1 month. He simply said, "Thank you." Positive word. The middle glass, she just say bad words for 1 month, every day for a month. And the other for 1 month, he simply ignored. And the result was, for that rice that received the good words, the positive words, didn't only smelled pleasant, it remained white, okay? While the one who received negative words turned black, but the one who was ignored turned rotten. Now, what is the message for this for us parents? Kung mangyari ito sa bigas, okay, how much more to people? So just imagine if you say good words to your children. You may be far, but you compliment your children every day. Expect that those words will make them positive individuals in the future, because they will carry with them the feelings of support, the feelings of appreciation, even if the parent may not be around, or even for the parent who is there with them. But for those children who always receive, okay, pagsisisi, sinusumbatan, okay, look what happened. They became resentful, umitim. No? They become hostile. And worse, for those who are ignored, neglected, they rot. So this can also happen to our children, because as human beings, no, they absorb energy. Okay, our words are powerful. They are living force. So, and they can effect change in the life of people around us. Kaya kung palagi kang sinasabihan na pangit, you end up believing na pangit ka. No? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for you. Pero kung palagi kang sinasabihan, magaling ka, no? Kaya mo yan, then you also become resilient. Okay, next slide, please. So, and this is what we call the natural law of the farm. Okay, what you plant, you harvest. Next slide, please. Okay. So, if you plant criticism, you will harvest condemnation. You become a condemning person. If you plant hostility, then the child becomes, would always be in the middle of a fight. No? If the child lives with ridicule, he becomes shy. If the child lives with fear, palagi siya pinapagalitan, anxious, then he always becomes apprehensive as he becomes an adult. No? But if the child lives with security, emotional security, support, and love, then the child also will grow up and believe in herself. He will believe that she can also do this, no, when she grows up like her parents. Okay, so these are the things that we will reap with the kind of things that we planted in the first place. And this is what you call the natural law of the farm. Kung nagtanim ka ng saging, hindi magbunga yan ng banana. No? What you planted is what you will reap. Next slide, please. And so, this is the reason why we have this webinar. Our migrant women workers and women who are still in destination countries need our support. We may call them our heroes. No? So if you look at their faces, no, they may be a parent, a single parent, or a same-sex parent, or migrant workers coming home or staying behind, we do not know. But still, we know that even if they are in a far country, they still have that skill to connect with their families and do something about it, and support and make their families and be able not only to cope with the family crisis that each one of us face, but they will also be able to face the added burden of the COVID pandemic. Next slide. And so, what is the thing that we have to bear in mind for migrant women workers? Family is not an important thing. It is actually everything. Can we say, I cannot do it? No. I can do it. You can do it. We can do it. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Je, for that very comprehensive presentation and with the very emotional video. Later on, I'm sure our participants will have some questions, but now let's call on Miss Eileen Sison for her presentation. Miss Eileen, please.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. I'm glad to be part of this webinar. And we had a very good introduction by Sophia, and she mentioned a lot of parenting tips. So I will add more also to what Dr. Je mentioned, some parenting tips and giving us the situation of the family here and the women migrant workers. So I will add more to the richness of the discussion this afternoon. Can you please start sharing my screen? Okay, next, first slide, next slide, please. Okay, so like what Dr. Je mentioned, parenting is a process. Oops, I think you're there. Parenting is a process, no? It's not like we are born that we know how to parent. So it's important that we get a lot of knowledge on how to be a parent, because it's really a continuous process of learning as our children grow older, no? So it's good to understand the family, look at the family in terms of what we call in psychology, the family systems perspective. it's good to see, it's important to see that the family is the smallest system in society, no? So it's a microcosm of society where each member is affected by all the other members in the family, no? It's like your body, no? You can compare the family to your body, that if you feel some pain in your hand, you are affected, no? You feel affected if you feel some pain in your hand. So in that sense, it's also that way in the family, no? So when one member is affected or experiences a crisis, then naturally everybody, every family member will get affected in different ways according to their stage of development and also according to how they perceive the situation, no? So it's important to see to look at it, no? Yung sinasabi nilang kasabihan na yung sakit ng kalingkingan ay nararamdaman ng buong katawan. Kasi ganun ang pamilya, no? Lahat na aapekto, iba-ibang degree lang, no? Depende lang sa karanasan at edad ng family member. Okay, let's continue. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will discuss what is the effect of the mother leaving, no, from the family based on our study that we've done years ago, and also with my work with women migrant workers and their families up all the way up to the present, no, because there is the mother leaving. Naturally, there's a lot of feelings of sadness in the family and the deep longing for the mother to be with them, no? With that sadness, there's always a wish na sana mabuo ang pamilya. Parang sa kanila, parang kulang, no? Kasi wala yung nanay. So there's always that wish that we hope we will all be together. Also based on that study, we found out that families, the fathers who are left behind really need a lot of support because they are not used to performing the role of the mother in the house. So there's a lot of added support that they need, which not only includes taking care of the daily chores, but also providing the kind of emotional connection with their children. So this is also very important. It's like fathers need to be emotionally connected with their children. Also, fathers also need support in accepting their role as part of being a homemaker, no, and seeing themselves being a homemaker and not just the typical male who is the main breadwinner in the family. So it's the shifting of perspective of my role as a father also needs to change. And this is where some fathers need help because it's difficult for them to accept that sila yung mas dependent, no? Medyo nagkakaroon ng shift in perspective, reframing of my role as a parent in the family. Next slide, please. Also, based on what we have learned and also with my experience, children at different stages of development perceive their family situation differently, no? So iba yung epekto pag ang bata, pag umalis yung nanay na bata pa yung anak, no, in their preschool, in grade school, at iba yung epekto pag umalis yung nanay pag teenager na. There's a big difference, no? For adolescents, they understand why the mother have to go abroad. They see it clearly, they know why, but it may either have a negative or positive effect on them. Some of them feel that they're very thankful for all the gifts that they receive because their family is the mother is giving them so much, but they also feel the sadness. So there's like a dissonance there. Masaya na malungkot. Kasi masaya, ang dami kong natatanggap na ang ganda-gandang mga gadgets, mga regalo, mga pasalubong, pero malungkot kasi hindi pa rin kami kompleto. No? For young children, it's very clear to them that they long for the mother. They're very sad, but there's still no cognitive understanding on why the mother has to be away. So some children feel very sad. Some children feel very traumatized, no? Especially for mothers who abruptly leave without even explaining, without giving the child a chance to say goodbye, no? Giving some kind of transition, some warning before they leave. May iba na talagang natotraumatize sila kasi biglang wala na lang yung nanay, no? And that takes a lot of toll on their emotional well-being as they get older. Next slide, please. So most of these children, they know what is going on. They are aware that the mother is away. They feel the sadness. And if the father is unable to become a parent, no, if the father becomes helpless because the mother is not away, if the father is unable to connect with the children, if the father is not present, no, in the home, the children become the tagasalo, no? They become the caretakers of the family. They become parents, no? So it becomes an abrupt end to being a child to playing, no? So I have spoken to girls, like what Dr. Jem mentioned, who when their mother left, suddenly grew up, suddenly had to become mothers, no? Substitute mothers to take care of their young children. So they see the situation, they see the truth clearly, and if the father is not able to step up to becoming that parent connected with the children, it's the children that end up becoming substitute parents when the mother is away. Next slide, please. Okay. So it's important to look at how to parent, no, from a distance. Also here, when you are here now, for the mothers and also for the fathers. It's important to see that children need to cope with the kind of family structure that they are in. That there is sadness, that this is the way the family is, this is the reality now. How can we help them cope? Because that is part of parenting, no? There's a change in the system, there's a change in the situation. How can we help them cope and still be okay about the mother being absent, no? For a lot of the OFWs that we spoke to, most of them cope with their situation by playing. And I think that's very important, no? As an advocate of play, it's important to be aware that play is the language of the child. Play is where they act out what is going on inside them, no? So play is healing in itself. So allow the children to play, no? That despite the absence of the mother, despite them having more responsibilities because of the absence of the mother, it's important they are given the time to play. Because ang sabi nga ng mga bata dito, masaya ako pag naglalaro, kailangan kong maglaro, kailangan ng kalaro. Okay, next slide, please. So play will help them release their feelings about the situation and helps them reenact the loss of the mother, no? I had a child that I was doing play therapy with, and his play all the time because his mother left when he was 6, no? He was always reenacting the departure of the mother, no? His play would always be, he would be playing that the mother was riding a car, going to the airport, and he was in a house with his father left behind. He kept on repeating and repeating that story, no? Because it's one way for them to make sense, to understand what happened, no? Because it can be traumatic for children with that kind of abrupt departure of the mother. So play will help them gain power over the situation, will help them feel that they're in control of the situation and express the loss that they feel. Next slide, please. So it's also important for mothers to see that even if you allow children to play, play is helpful for them. It helps them cope with the present situation. It does not also mean that you should buy expensive gifts all the time, no? Because it's important to see that we have a lot of women who feel guilty because of their absence, because they are not in the home. So there's a lot of guilt, which is natural, no? It's natural to feel guilty, but it does not mean that we should compensate that guilt by buying expensive toys, because this is not going to be good for the children, no? Like in this infographic that I posted here, the more a toy does, the less your child does. So most gadgets, no, and toys that are more battery operated, you know, more it's more like you just watch the toy, or like gadgets, no, that it's just fingering with using your thumbs. It's important to see that this will prevent the child from developing their imagination and creativity, no? And there's a lot of cases now also of children, especially boys, who are addicted to gadgets. And this has somehow become a way of them compensating for the loss of the mother, for the absence of the mother. So it's important to give what is appropriate according to the needs of the child, and it does not have to be something very expensive, and to buy toys, to buy gifts that may be used in many different ways, no? That may develop their creativity, maybe like blocks, or if it's possible, Lego, no? Or even sometimes you don't need to buy those toys. What's important is that money and material gifts are not always used as a source of reward, because they may become dependent on it and they may become more passive, no? In terms of you spoiling the child and becoming indulgent, they'll become more passive and dependent, no? Like the way what Dr. Jem mentioned as an example. Okay, let's go now to the next slide. Okay. Other things that are important, especially for mothers or for all parents, is that the communication has to be constant and regular, no? For mothers who are out of the country, it's important that there is a schedule that when the child is able to talk to the mother, because this predictability makes the child feel emotionally secure in the relationship he or she has with the mother. No, it gives them a sense of security, a sense of feeling safe, that no matter what happens at this time of the day, I will be able to connect with my mother. And that's very important for them, for their growth, no? And connecting with them means that you don't talk to them to tell them what to do or to nag them, no? Or like what Dr. Jess said, when the kind of words that you use is very important to nurture your child. Connecting with them means that you listen to them. You listen to how they feel, you listen to their interests, their experience, and not just focusing on your expectations of them. No? Not just focusing and saying, did you already do your homework? Did you already do this chore? What is your grade? What score did you get in a test? No, but it's asking more questions for you to know more about the child, no? Because that's what's important, that you still get to know your child through the distance, or even if you're here, so that when you come home, there is that connection, no? Because it's really a big gap, no? You leave the children, they're much younger. When you come home, or when you come home and retire, they're so different already. And if you do not have that connection with them, there's not going to be any bonding. There's not going to be any relationship between you and your child. So that connection is important. And it's important that it is done in a positive manner, in a positive tone of voice, that you are more comforting, you are more open, and not judgmental of what your child is going through. Next slide, please. It's also important, these are just some of the concrete tips that I will discuss, no, as in terms of having a regular constant communication with your children, is to include them in the plans for the family, depending according to their developmental age. It's important to let them see that they may take part, no, in planning for the family, and not just them being dependent on you, no. And when you need to talk to children about a specific behavior or incident, no, this is something that I tell parents, I tell mothers who ask me advice on how can I reprimand my daughter for something that I found out that she did, or how can I talk to my child because of this certain misbehavior. These are just certain specific tips that I included here, no? That when you want to talk to your child, it's important that you are also calm, no? And Sophia mentioned this in the beginning.
Sí. Miss Eileen. Miss Eileen. Wala si Miss Eileen. Nagka-problema si Miss Eileen. Ms. Eileen.
I am back.
Thank you.
I suddenly died down, but I have a backup Wi-Fi here. So what part did you hear me say?
Number 1 pa lang nitong tips, ma'am. Talking to your child.
Talking to your child. Okay, so these are just very specific steps on how to talk to your child. No, that it's important that you are not emotional, you are calm, you ask about what happened, you listen to the child's opinion, and you try to understand where the child is coming from. No, so it's important that the manner of talking will create the kind of open communication between you and your child, and especially for teenagers, for adolescents, it's important to also be concise. No? If you want them to listen to you when you talk to them, do not nag. Be brief about what you want to say. Maybe talk about it in 3 points. Number 1, this is what I want to say. Number 2, number 3. Because sometimes they tend to tune you out when you are saying something. Pag mahaba na yung sinasabi mo, parang sermon, wala na silang maririnig. So how do you connect with them? It's how you talk to them according to their developmental stage, no? And being able to stick to concrete behavior instead of judging the behavior or generalizing the child's behavior. Next slide, please. Okay. It's also important that you do not embarrass them in front of other people or in photos that you post in social media, because sometimes that this will also make the child feel that you do not understand where she is coming from. No? Not criticize their peers, because the more you criticize their peers, the more that they will connect with those peers. No? That's a challenging thing. If you want the child to be able to decide and discern the kind of relationships that the child is in, it's important that they create that own judgment by you not criticizing their peers. No? So it's important that you see yourself as guiding the child in developing all good and balanced habits. Next slide, please. Okay. Also, parenting involves, like what Dr. Jem mentioned, no? First, it's being aware of what kind of a parent you are, and from there, finding out, is this the kind of parent I want to be, and will it have a good effect on my child? And if this is the kind of parent I want to be, then I also need to practice positive discipline. No? When I say positive discipline, this means that you train the child because you're molding the person's character, and that you teach the child to control his behavior instead of controlling his behavior for him. No? Because the goal of discipline is that you want them to grow up independent of you, that even if you're not around, they will be able to do good things. They will be able to decide right according to the proper values that they have. So positive discipline also involves productive problem solving. No, that if there's a no, what is the yes? If the child cannot do this, what are the possible options that the child can do? And this is very, very important right now, because there's a lot of self-harm and suicidal behaviors in children and in adolescents. No, I had a client as young as 9-year-old who tried to kill himself by jumping off a building. And this is a reality right now, no, that there's a lot of self-harm because children do not know how to cope with what they are going through. And if they can think of a solution or an alternative to a challenge, if they see a block, they can't think of any other way of coping except just to hurt myself for me to feel better, or to get out of the situation by killing myself. So that starts with positive discipline, where you teach the child to solve problems. If there is a block, if there is a no, what is the yes? What are the alternatives? So encourage them to think of different ways of dealing with the challenge. It's not you who's always telling them what to do, how to do it, but asking them or telling them, what do you think can be done? How do you think we should do this? So it's helping them think of alternatives to finding solutions to challenges. Next slide, please. Okay, so positive discipline also involves modeling, like what Dr. J also mentioned, that how parents respond to stress and what is going on around them is also how children will respond to stress. How we express our feelings is also how our children will learn how to express their feelings. So there's a lot of responsibility with the parents who are left behind and also the mothers in terms of showing their children that despite what is going on with their lives, they are able to deal with it. They're able to respond to stress. And of course, the last part of a positive discipline is developing your child's self-esteem. That the process of developing a positive self-esteem also comes from the parent. If I'm able to see myself positively, if I'm able to deal with challenges in a way that I can cope, then my children will also learn that way too. So there's a lot of helping children grow by also them seeing how we do it on ourselves. Next slide, please. So with all this, respect is the key. Our children, we have to change that perception that we own our children. We have to change that perception that we are the parents, so they should follow us, they should respect us. Respect has to go both ways. Respect has to go both ways so that they will become more open to us, they will become more, they will look up to us. They will look up to us as our guides because when that happens, when they feel that we respect them. Next slide, please. Okay. Another factor that helps the children grow up to become emotionally well for children whose mothers are far from them is also the importance of the marital relationship. We can see in studies and with families that I have worked with that the family is able to cope. The children are able to cope more with the situation of the mother being away if the couple, if the mother and the father have a good marital relationship. So it's important that we may be concerned with bringing up our children, supporting them, but it's also important to strengthen the communication between the couple. That's very, very important in terms of making the children more emotionally well. Next slide, please. Okay. So self-care is also important, especially for mothers who are out of the country, who are also here, because like what Sophia mentioned, the reality is we have so many tasks to fulfill, we have so many hats to play, roles to play, that self-care is important for us to be able to clearly think and become enough to know how to help our children. So the greatest gift you can give your child is yourself. This means that part of your work as a parent is to keep growing in self-knowledge and in awareness. We have to be grounded in the present moment to share what is deepest and best in ourselves. We only have right now. So this is from a couple who is into mindfulness. But this is really important, that we cannot give to our children just the financial support, but also the emotional support. We cannot give that if we ourselves are unable to take care of ourselves. We cannot give what we do not have. So it's important to look at that too for us to be able to objectively know how to parent our children in the different developmental stages that they're in. Okay, I think I'm about to end my presentation. Next slide, please. So if you get tired, everybody gets tired now. The pandemic is creating quite so much chaos in our lives. We have to learn how to rest, not to quit. And resting is important because it takes so much courage to rest in a culture where work is being rewarded all the time. Okay, next slide, please. So everything, these are just, everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you. So self-care is a must, that we cannot be able to help other people. We cannot be able to to guide them if we also don't objectively take care of ourselves, no? Because mothers, also the fathers who are left behind, they have difficulty dealing with so much responsibilities. They can be overwhelmed, but it's important that children see that you can also stop. You may stop, and it's okay if, like what Sophia said, that the house is messy, that things are not done. It's okay. What's more important is that you're feeling okay together, you feel calm, and there's that sense of togetherness and emotional support that each and every one feels. Okay, next slide, please. So the anxiety is always there. There's a lot of anxiety going on because of the pandemic, which is a natural feeling that we're all feeling. Anxiety is high. Some people have difficulty sleeping. No, sometimes it's manifested in us not being able to eat properly. Some people are overthinking. Oh, there's so much of that now. But what's important to see is that it's not going to help. It's not going to help. It's just going to make us so tired. It's just going to make us more burdened. So what's important is there's a lot of self-care that we are doing right now. Okay, I think I'm going on now with my, okay. So I mentioned that a while ago that rest is important. And the time to relax is important, because that's when we'll be able to objectively know how to help our children, because sometimes we become more emotionally, when we're more emotionally stressed, it's hard for us to know what we need to do and what we want to tell them. That's why it's important to always find time to always be calm, to rest, to connect with our own selves so that we'll become better parents. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eileen. So we had two comprehensive presentations in the sharing from Sophia. So now let's go to our open forum. But before that, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Froilan Malit, who will be doing the Thank you very much for the presentations. And before that, let's go to the open forum. And I would like to introduce Froilan first. He's an associate at the Gulf Labor Markets and Migration, a research fellow at the UP Diliman CFAL program, and a managing director of Rights Corridor, a regional news platform and research on migration and rights issues. Over the past decade, Froilan lived and worked across the Gulf region, working as technical and migration policy consultant for a number of regional and international organizations, including the Abu Dhabi Dialogue, ILO, and IOM. He's also an advisory committee member for the ILO Regional Office for Arab States Migration Advisory Group, and previously held visiting research positions at the American University at Sharjah and Syed University. He has previously published numerous peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and policy papers exploring migration issues in the Gulf region. He holds degrees from Cornell University the University of Oxford, and a migration certificate from the European University Institute. He's currently studying international relations in the Department of Police at Cambridge. Froilan, please, our open forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carmelita, for the kind introduction. And thank you to these fantastic and very much comprehensive presentations from Dr. Jerry and from our resident psychologist, Ms. Beatrice Eileen Season. I think I want to add three important points too from their presentations. One, if we also have to look at these elements that they discussed across time and space. Economic recessions in destination countries will prolong a bit more over the next 5 years. So the transnational financial effects on families and households will continue to intensify in the long run, and this will have long and to an extent painful challenges for a lot of families in the Philippines. The second, the issues related to burden sharing and shifting approaches within households in the Philippines. Again, as both Dr. Jerry and our resident psychologist has mentioned, these would have critical complex implications for a lot of these families, and the tips that they've highlighted are very, very important to take into account. And lastly, the permanent reality of transnational parenting. I think these are the critical elements that our government needs to further think about, because children respond differently to migration options and migration issues that a lot of their parents in destination countries and those who are returning back in the Philippines. And with this crisis, I do like what our resident psychologist Eileen has highlighted, sort of the importance of communication, because this is something that a lot of migrants actually struggle. There's always this asymmetric information. Again, they often set a high sort of expectation with very different reality, especially in destination countries. They don't really report how much money do they actually make, based on a lot of the micro economic studies that have been done in the Gulf countries, looking at Philippines and the Gulf region. So thank you for these presentations. And I think I want to start with this very basic question, which I think Mr. Loreto Soriano has highlighted it. How, if you look at these fantastic expert opinions that you both highlighted, Dr. Jerry and our psychologist, Ms. Eileen, my question here is, how integrated or accessible are these seminars actually within our current institutional framework in destination countries? Currently, we have 8 social welfare attachés, and when I worked in the region, I didn't see a lot of these type of seminars actually being conducted within diplomatic missions, because the focus is usually extending labor and protection services, to Filipinos. But this particular aspect, it's significantly absent, and not a lot of female OFWs actually have such an access. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that. I think I want to start with this institutional framework, and then go down to migration, parenting, and the psychological impact of migration. I want to start with Dr. Jerry. What are your thoughts on this in terms of the strength of our institutions at the moment?
I think at this point in time, we should be thankful for COVID, because without COVID, this was not brought up in the open and highlighted. Before, this kind of parenting was simply taken by schools. I have gone to so many schools with so many kids whose parents are working abroad. As a matter of fact, my cousins and my eldest brother was also an FW. And I observed that this was not really taken seriously by service providers. No? And most of the time, what I see was we are focused on the legal aspect in helping our migrant women workers, but not so much in the mental health issue. And so we leave it to the schools to do that. But now we realize that even schools had problems. And therefore, I think this is now the opportunity and a challenge for many migrant service providers to take, and perhaps integrate in their own programs. Because we cannot simply allow this to go on, because ultimately it will come back to our society. Whatever happens to our migrant women workers and their children. Imagine 50%. And we have millions of them who are cut off from their own families. This can really have a very detrimental effect on society. Una, they cannot be contributing to our economic development. Children will be problematic, so on and so forth. And so I think this is the time for us to really revisit our programs, especially from our embassies, and how will they incorporate or include or perhaps introduce similar programs so that they can truly help, no? So that when our migrant workers come home, they are not inside the coffins, or they will not end up jumping the building, but really healthy and productive, and at the same time supportive of their families. So that's my take.
Thank you, Dr. Jerry. Ms. Eileen, you also made a powerful analysis on using these in-depth stories that you collected, and you actually made me think about, you know, using the stories that you highlighted, how do you rethink about these institutions, you know, in a COVID-19 context? So I wonder, what are your thoughts too in terms of looking at these institutions that we have in the Philippines and in destination countries? As psychologist, Ms. Eileen?
Thank you for that question, Furlan. No, I think there's a lot of work that we're all doing for migrant workers and their families, but I think there needs to be an integration in the sense that even the preparation of the mother leaving, even before the mother leaves, it's not just the mother that we should prepare, but also the family, which I think is not something that is being prioritized now. There's not much preparation of the family emotionally for the mothers leaving. So I think the program in terms of supporting these families should be from the very beginning, even before the mother leaves, the children and the father are also given that kind of support to help them emotionally prepare themselves when the mother leaves. No? So it's really a whole integration all the way from when the mother leaves up to when the mother is already out of the country.
Thank you so much for that point. Yes, you did. For people who wanted to ask questions, please raise your hand, or you can, you know, send your questions in the chat box. I think I want to give the floor to our DSWD official, Ms. Lucita Villanueva. I think she is also looking at these questions, whether our institutions are responsive to these changing issues that we're seeing with COVID-19, parenting, etc. Ms. Lucita?
Hello.
Hello, Paul.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah. Well, yeah, with the inputs for this afternoon, I really can relate, no, myself being, and I have a teenager, so she would. It would pain my heart when every time that she would tell me that, "Mommy, nag-away kami ni Daddy." So the message for me is that wala siyang kakampi doon. But anyway, yeah, in the course of our engagement with our women migrant workers, so it's a very great deal, no? The while it pains them leaving their family, but you know, the level of understanding and the level of coping with them, that going abroad is the only means for them to really earn a living. But good for those who have been successful and had landed the jobs which are very positive and they have employers who are very supportive. But a lot of our kababayans really landed their job with problems and challenges here and there. So in our at our end, this all we study and we consider as reference in our dealings with them. So we would always discuss with them and process them vis-a-vis their experience, the social cost of migration, so the positive and negative effects of it. But at this point that the DSWD has deployed attaches, we see the need really that the prevention. So as what I've suggested in the chat box, that the payers, we can enrich and we can improve the content of our payers. And I believe and I trust that LGUs would play a vital role because they're on the ground. So they are the ones who are directly, dealing with this. But for sure, they should be guided and supported by the national government. So, in fact, at our end, we see the need for us to be involved because as of now, we are not involved in the conduct of PIDOS nor the payers, but we see the need to really participate because at the long run, at the end of the day, women migrant workers, especially once they get pregnant or they have problems along children, then at the embassy, it would always be the social welfare attaché that would attend to them. So good for those posts that we have deployed our attachés, but hopefully we can increase our tribe, we can increase our deployment, and soon we can reach out for similar cases, and we can be of help to our women migrant workers. So my message in here is really the before the social preparation of these women migrant workers before they leave the family, because the PIDOS, I wonder if even the spouse is involved for them to understand, no? And we see the need that even the children. So that is what we recommend. And another is we have our family development sessions with our Pantawid Pamilya program. So we are recommending and we are in the preparation of involving a module on this matter. So on the social cost of migration. So I hope we can push through with this so that in a way we can reach out more of our kababaihan on the ground in the field. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucita. I think I want to link the question now to Mr. Lito Soriano. So, Mr. Lito, Dr. Jerry talked about how these embassies, for example, focus so much on the legal aspect, but not the mental health systems, with mental health issues faced by migrant workers. And our resident psychologist, Ms. Beatrix, actually talked about, the need to integrate not just, mothers, but also their family, and to an extent, the fathers as well. And our DSWD official talked about the need to, further collaborate and the role of community level work and NGOs, etc. Now, given your personal insights that you've shared here in the 1980s, your market and institutional in-depth knowledge of our existing systems, how should we rethink about these, issues as well as the markets and institutions as they actually change over time? So, Mr. Lito Soriano, I'll give you the floor, sir.
Good afternoon to all. Tatagalaguin ko na lang. Nung umalis ako, 1980, and it was about May 20, my first child was 8-month-old. And while I overseas at night, I keep on thinking, what should I do so that I will be with my kid? And I believe at the time that as a father, I should be with him. So every night ka na planning. Kaya lang, hindi mo pwedeng planuhin lang yung problema mo sa as a parent, kasama economic side eh. So, kasi yun ang pinaka-primary purpose mo na pag-abroad eh. Nakatulong na malaki sa akin yung asawa ko. Pinatigil ko siya magtrabaho, so magkasama sila doon. Plus may nanay, So, plus yung mga kamag-anak, Nilipat ko sila sa side ng parents ng wife ko, and I build my small house doon. Isang maliit na bahay lang. ang binuo namin ni Mrs. bago umalis. So, but with that, yung nga sabi ko diyan sa chat ko, yung problema na yon o yung fear na yon na baka saan mapunta yung growth ng anak ko, strengthened my family values and also push my planning kasi at that time, wala sa isip ko na magtagal sa overseas. Sabi ko sa sarili ko, hindi ko kaya siguro na malayo sa asawa ko, malayo sa mga anak ko. No? Now, I'm a recruiter now eh. I believe we were successful. In fact, my family was 2013 o 14 OFW awardee ng OWA, Model OFW Family Awardee. And we were able to build our family, lahat na graduates na. And in fact, yung panganay at bunso ko is running our family companies. The panganay is running our recruitment agency. My bunso is running I have 3 IT companies. Anyway, as a recruiter now, we deploy about between 600 to 800 female OFWs. And these are nurses. No? Most of them are nurses or housekeeping, some are office staff, but not much. Ang nakikita ko ngayon, narinig ko itong dalawang presentation na very ako na open na I'm touched na dapat may ganyan eh. Ang nakikita ko siguro institutional paradigm shift Tama po yung nabanggit ni Sir na maganda itong COVID, may binigay sa atin na kaisipan at saka oportunidad. These webinars actually is a good opportunity by adding capacities on our part. Siguro isang institutional aspect na pwedeng gawin ng ating gobyerno or gawin na namin mismo kami mga private sectors that nakikita ko sa amin, we might come up with but we need help. We might come up with Zoom-driven parenting seminar of our departing workers, mga nurses namin na PALES. Bago sila umalis siguro, i-engage namin sila sa isang ganito. Na hindi nila kailangan pumunta ng Manila. No? Hindi na kasi uso ngayon yung face-to-face o classroom style. And this is what COVID brought to us. So maybe 1 or 2 seminars, pwedeng separate yung mga lalaki, yung mga engineers and highly skilled. Kasi highly skilled kami. Highly skilled technician or pwedeng magsabay. Kaya lang kasama yung pamilya. Sasama natin yung pamilya. Now, with COVID, with this technology also, maski na-deploy namin, pwede pa rin namin i-engage. Sabay na naman yung pamilya. Pwede kami magawa ng strengthening family relationship, family values, seminars through webinar. No? And what actually we need is capacity. Kasi recruiter kami. May mga partner kami like DSWD or isang NGOs that we can help provide the content or trainers. It will be helpful. And then we bring this to OWA and to PUA as an example. That could be done. PEOs and PIDOs is not enough eh. Nag-aapurahan yung programa na ganyan eh. Para lang ma-meet mo yung requirement ba na nakalagay sa regulasyon ng PUA. So, ang mindset natin kasi masyadong regulatory. Kailangan gawin nyo to. So, gagawin nga. Kaya lang, pag ginagawa ng mga nag-i-implement, pati yung target na tao mo, nag-aapura rin siya eh. Wala nga sa importansya sa kanya eh. Katulad kanina, naiwan na message sa akin eh. Family is not only an important thing, but everything. That's true. That's the basis of my OFW experience eh. Halos gabi-gabi, walang pamilyang nasa utak mo eh. And keep on writing, you keep on planning eh. And I think it helps me. No? And during this time, wala pang itong technology. Pag makatanggap ako ng sulat every 3 months eh. Kaya ginagawa namin ni Mrs. Ninanamburan namin yung sulat namin. Ito yung sagot, yung sulat mo na number 3. Tapos reiterate mo ulit yung mga, at saka mahilig kami mag-numbers, 1, 2, 3. Ito yung sinasabi mo, hindi paragraph. May numbers para pagbalikan mo yung sinabi mo dun sa number 7, bakit gano'n, di ba ganyan? So may referencing kayo, no? You have to innovate. No? Kaya lang mahaba yung mga sulat, hindi yung maiksi. So that is communication, and that is jointly. I can say na parang sabay kami nagmamanage ng pamilya namin ni Mrs. noong nasa abroad ako. In fact, because of that kind of communication, after 7 months nandun ako, mayroon na kaming sari-sari store ni Mrs. na maliit eh. Nag-start na siyang kumita kasi sabi ko sa Mrs. ko, my salary is just $320 eh. And this will not be enough. So, nag-start siya as turon-turon. Alam ni Mel yan eh. Explain ko na yan sa isang presentation. Hanggang sa nagkaroon na kami. Nung bumalik ako, first year ko na bumalik, na-establish na namin yung small business namin. So, hanggang sa nakabalik ako sa Pilipinas, actually tumigil lang si Mrs. sa kanyang tindahan nung, I think 2007 na mayroon na siyang apo. And that is 1985 to 2007. It helps build a family. It helps build the wealth ng pamilya eh. But I have to, siguro isang advantage ko is that mayroon akong exit strategy na iniisip nung paalis ako at saka nung nandun ako sa Saudi Arabia. Yan ang wala sa ating mga OFW. And family values, strengthening relationship with your family is part of your kasama sa exit mo yan sa overseas eh. So yan lang siguro masishare ko. But again, I would like to reiterate, there are so many things that we can do. We have to institutionalize this. You have to encourage, you have to coach. I-coach natin itong mga recruitment agency dahil hindi naman nila party yan eh. I-coach natin, ito yung magandang programa. May mga palis kayong domestic helpers lahat yung pinapalis nyo. Why not, in addition to PIDOS, mag-webinar kayo kasama yung pamilya ng domestic workers. Pag alis nila, nandun na sila. Kung ako ang recruiter domestic helper, bawat isang domestic helper, pagdating sa employer, mayroon ako love letter. Love letter from the president of the LBS Domestic Worker Recruitment Agency. Dear Hassan Omar, I'm entrusting to you a very highly trained, very nice, hardworking Elena Jose as your household. Parang ganun ba? May love letter ka. Establish a relationship also with the employer. And then request for an opportunity for every 3 months webinar. Something like that. But we have to coach. We have to tell this institution, naka-institution na eh, mga recruitment agencies and your association. So that's my comment po.
Thank you, Mr. Loreto. I think a lot of the points that you've highlighted are very important, and that these are a lot of things that our senior officials would really need to think about. And I think I like that you mentioned Zoom parenting actually as a private sector approach. You know, perhaps that's an alternative to PAOS and PAOS. I think I want to go to Ms. Irene and link Mr. Loreto's recommendations, because I think he's also looking at the community level. And Irene Abano, I think you talked about the need to, rethink about community level reforms in terms of how we do migration. So I want to give the floor to Ms. Irene, and then we'll go back to our experts. And let's see how they actually, if they're given the chance to set these policies, how they would imagine this kind of reforms, So Ms. Irene Abano, you have the floor.
Okay. I'm Irene. I'm from Center for Migrant Advocacy. We have been working with the PESO, the LGUs, and I was just thinking, because in the past, the recommendation has been to do PDOS with the family members. But then, how can you afford that, no? To bring the family to, usually the PDOS is done in the centers. So it would be very expensive to bring them to the centers to join the OFW for the PDOS. So I think it should be a community level thing. Perhaps the PESO, or if they already have the help desk, together with the Municipal Social Welfare Development Office, can attend to this. No? So instead of bringing the families to the cities for the PDOS, I have something like this at the community level. So and then that would be the responsibility of the PESO with the Municipal Social Welfare and Development Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Irene, for your point. Now, to our experts, Dr. Jerry and our resident psychologist, Ms. Eileen, how do you imagine these types of reforms? I mean, they're saying at community level, we need to rethink about it and restrict or perhaps reorganize our institutions in spending countries. And then Mr. Loreto actually, to an extent, criticize, the degree of responsiveness of these institutions. PAOS, for example, is still optional. It's not mandatory. And I think a lot of the issues are often in destination countries. So Dr. Jerry, I want to give you the first floor, sir, and then our resident psychologist, Ms. Eileen.
Okay. Thank you for that, Froilan. I think one important element I noted that is lacking and that is on top were the studies done by the different service providers. Like, for example, I think Professor Oyi had a study, UN study, and had recommendations. And as what you have said, we need a lot of studies. No? But the problem is our different service providers were funded, had so many studies, but the studies were not even tapped or were not even collected or were not even heard by our government agencies. And that's a loss of effort and resources because this had been, I think, was what Ms. Irene said. There had been studies and recommendations, and yet they were not picked up. And this could have been avoided, no? But like Sir Loreto, now that we realize, for example, the PAYOS and the PIDOS, no? It's really very true that many migrant workers had no time to really give much time to bring their families. But we have also to consider that if one half of our migrant women workers are high school or elementary graduate, that's another hurdle that we have also to face. So if we will not bring their families, so we'll discuss that with them because their understanding is simply to leave, to get money. But they had no time to really think about that and discuss. No? So I think that's another element that we have to highlight. No? Bring back again the many data that our different organizations had already done, put them in one database, and what were the recommendations given? And perhaps there could have been so many, only that they were already covered by so many red tapes, etc. or what. Kaya it becomes a repetition. No? Kaya this could have been avoided as well. No? Kaya tuloy, we wasted so much energy, no? And resources for this. So that's my take.
I think Dr. Jerry's point, he just hit it in the nail. Really, it's this lack of perhaps absence of sharing or even a database. I think this is so important, and I think these raises a lot of interesting questions in terms of the culture of research, and it's difficulty in terms of translating into concrete, actionable policy actions. And I think, Ms. Eileen, what do you think of all these things too? And then I'll go to to our DSWD officials. How feasible, politically wise, are these ideas that have been highlighted both by our experts and our audience here? Ms. Eileen, what do we need to think about now, actually? Some of the further gaps that, aside from Dr. Jerry has just mentioned.
I think because of the reality that we are facing now, and with the increase, the pandemic just stopped the increase of the migrant of mothers leaving. But once the pandemic is over, it's going to continue. So it's a reality that I think we will be facing. So it's important that we have to prioritize parenting, including that in our program in terms of preparing these mothers, because as we all know, we are leaving a lot of children behind without their mothers. So that is going to have a very big impact on them, no? And the impact of that can be detrimental to our children and to our country. So I think as part of policy making and implementing the programs, we have to include that. We have to prioritize that.
Thank you, Ms. Eileen. Ms. Lucita, what are your thoughts on these recommendations that our experts have mentioned? And then I'll go back to Mr. Loreto, actually, whether these are practical and realistic, and what can we do about them? Ms. Lucita from DSWD.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, yes, Paul.
Hello? Yes. Yeah, I totally agree, no? Totally agree with what our speakers have validated in the discussion. But for the time being, at the end of at the SWD's end, we are doing that with our field offices and all. I wonder if we have somebody from OWA, from Dolly, who are in charge of the conduct of PIDOS. But I would like to pick up our chat with Sir Loreto because uh, just last year we have started our engagement with the group with the PASEI, and I think this would be a very valuable development if the partnership can go beyond in the can progress. I mean, in the partnership of conducting PIDOS orientation or whatever we will call it, with those recruited uh, potential migrant workers, especially the women, because if we deploy women migrant workers, there's a lot of complications because like in the Middle East, we have an increasing number of undocumented children because once the Filipina get pregnant, they cannot even register the birth of their babies. And with that, that would escalate to another problem like if these babies will be repatriated, then it would be a problem because they cannot travel because they don't have the report to birth and so on and so forth. So I think, and with the suggestion of Ma'am Irene, yeah, I think Dolly, for that matter, and OWA, who are the primary agencies providing our PAYOS, PIDOS in coordination with the PESO. So while the MSWDOs are under the local government, then the SWD as the mother agency, we would be very much willing to be involved or to participate in their skills enhancement or capability building among the local social workers in the conduct of the PIDOS for that matter. So I personally, with the experience that we have with our migrant workers, especially women, then we really believe, no, and we trust that once this aspect will be highlighted, no, in the preparation of the women migrant worker with with her family. So we believe that the concerns and challenges facing them would be lessened, if not totally eradicated. And yeah, for our children. So basically, the impact on our Filipino children who are left behind by mothers working abroad is really one consideration that we should look into and prioritize. Yeah, thank you.
Um, Thank you, Paul, Ms. Lucita, for your comment. Mr. Loreto, I think I will throw the questions to you and then last comments from our experts. Mr. Loreto, you've been an OFW, a recruiter, and a consultant to a government, and you've seen how the government has responded to different crises. Civil military conflicts in the Middle East, for example, have really repatriated a lot of OFWs, etc. Knowing how the government has responded to these crises, and the domestic issues that we face at the moment and the types of limited budgets that we're facing, how do you think the government will deal or respond to these recommendations and current problems that both of our experts have highlighted at a home level perspective? Mr. Loreto.
Well, we have seen a kind of initiative that started during Pinoy or even before, the tripartism in approaching, in developing policy sa PWA. We have what we call mayroon kaming tripartite council sa land-based at saka sa sea-based mayroon din. Siguro strengthen yon. Tapos ipasok natin itong napaka-importanting issue of helping the families and the workers overseas. You know? Kami nakita ko kanina, may exchanges kami ni Ma'am Lucita sa DSWD. Pupurso ko yon. With PASEI. I was the former president of PASEI also in 1993 96. So puso ko sa leadership ng PASEI na baka magkaroon ng institutional approach and then maibenta namin yung idea sa mga members ng PASEI o recruitment agencies. Wherein, hindi naman kailangan yung parang PIDOS or PEOS type na classroom in delivering this kind of important messaging. Itong webinar na nandun sila sa pamilya nila ay pwede nang gawin ng mga recruitment agencies sa mga paalis nila. So what I'm trying to say is that individually, recruitment agencies should be encouraged and incentivized to provide webinar seminars on how to strengthen family values, parents management, and so on and so forth, bago umalis. And then, may programa rin doon sa napaalis nila, yung mga na-deploy nila na kababaihan o even kalalakihan. So, I believe it's a good initiative. On our part, sa LBS kasi, yung company ko, we call it LBS Recruitment Solutions, yung pinaka-plataforma ng aming recruitment philosophy ay endearing. From the time na mag-apply yung aplikante, we do a lot of, we do things na sa amin sarili, mga staff tsaka management, o how we improve our relationship with the applicant. So tawag namin endearing programs and handling sa mga workers. Kasi ang fear namin yung challenges ng PROILAN, yung challenges ng batas na konting mali dun sa job site, kasalanan ng agency, bayaran ng agency, bayaran. So what we try, we make friends with the family and the workers. So mayroon kami endearing programs. And this could be one that we can pursue there individually. Kami na mismo, mag-start kami niyan. And then pati yung mga na-deploy namin, although ang challenges nga, sabi nga ni Admin Hoso, Admin Kakdak nung nasa PVP siya, dinalaw niya yung system, yung LBS. Kasi meron kaming sariling online platforms where we can communicate to our workers anytime, anywhere they are. 24/7 yun. Maski nasa abroad sila, natatrack namin kung nasaan sila, kung gusto nila magpatrack. At makakapag-message sila sa amin anytime. Tapos from the time na umalis sila, 48 hours from the date, time ng flight, makakatanggap sila kagad ng message sa akin, inquiring about what happened to your trip, what happened to the handling ng welcoming o induction program ng employers. Tapos within 3 months na naman, pinapalop na namin kung nasusunod yung kontrata, may mga bullying ba doon, nasusunod ba yung mga anti-bullying program ng employers namin, something like that. And 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, hanggang sa matapos yung kontrata, mayroon kaming messages sa kanila. Pinapadala yung technology system namin. Dinidevelop na namin yung message. So we can add this kind of additional program. Ang iniisip ko lang, kailangan namin ng isang katuwang, isang kapartner siguro na katulad ni Dr. Jerry, si Ma'am, na expert sila siguro a little bit shorten yung presentation, but yung mga slide alone kung ikaw dating OFW, ramdam mo kagad, Sir Jerry, yung sinasabi nyo, yung maski nababasahin ko lang yung slide nyo nararamdaman ko na yung gano'ng ka-importante yung sinasabi nyo about yung impact ng isang authoritarian na parents sa yung passive parents or not. Kasi naranasan ko po yun So madali ring ma-absorb yun, ma-feel ng isang OFW kasi OFW siya, nasa malayo siya Ang challenge talaga natin dito ay masyadong busy ang utak ng ating mga OFW kasi ang daming oportunidad sa online na ngayon, social medias. So we have to buy, we have to sell, and dapat may buy-in sila sa gusto nating mangyari. At nakikita ko diyan, isang pinakamalakas na institusyon sa ngayon na nakita ko, yung recruitment agency. Kasi kung yung recruitment agency, mayroon siyang corporate social responsibility programs, mayroong endearing initiative siya sa kanyang mga dinideploy na workers. Kasi ang laki ng impact economically sa amin Mga employer namin halos 15 years, 20 years sa amin, hindi maalis Kasi pag nakita naman nila na qualified yung mga tao, tapos happy sila, may maganda kaming relation sa kanila, yung mga employer mismo, stay with you. In fact, hindi ako nag-abroad Hindi ako, alam ni Mel yan Hindi ako pupunta sa abroad kasi takot ako mag-flight. But employers comes to us. Inirecommend kami ng employer namin, subukan nyo si Lito Soriano. Subukan nyo yung agency na yun. Kami na lang namimili kung sino yung tatanggapin namin in a very nice way. Kasi minsan, kunwari, parang rekomendado ni Mel. Parang ganun what I'm trying to say is that good things, mayroong remunerated na balik sa'yo. So, kailangan may benta lang natin to sa ating mga recruiters. Maring hindi lahat ay kakapit, but we can grow, no? So, tingnan namin, Ma'am Lucita, with Pasay. We can start with Pasay on an association-wide approach and then ibenta na wherein meron tayong pilot na 5, 10 na agency doing it, and then later on lumalaki. Tapos ang messaging naman ng mga NGOs natin, sabihin sa POA, bigyan nyo ng incentive yung mga agency na nagpo-provide ng ganyan. Kasi ang kulang sa programa natin, sa overseas employment program natin, mas malaki yung regulatory concept eh. Yung developmental side tsaka yung incentivizing yung may tamang ginagawa, medyo mahina. And I think that could be one of the paradigm na changes naman ng POA para sa mga recruitment agencies. That's my comment, Froilan. Thank you for
Mr. Loreto. Thank you so much. I think one the key point here really is that you can't ignore the role of the private sector, especially seasoned private sector actors like Mr. Loreto with deep institutional memory of our migration governance system. And I think this is such a lesson for academics and experts in the Philippines, the need to transnationally collaborate with Filipinos who are, for example, based in the Middle East, Asia, and Europe, and really optimize these, like decade-long of knowledge and perspectives that they accumulated. And Mr. Loreto has highlighted a lot of these points. So again, this goes back to this culture of research. And also, I'm based in the Middle East. Dr. Terry and our psychologist, Ms. Eileen, I'm also happy to collaborate with both of you and really give you a more regional insights on these issues. So last point, Paul, I heard we're running out of time. Dr. Jerry, your final thoughts, and our resident psychologist, Ms. Eileen. Oh, we can hear you, Paul. Dr. Jerry. Hello.
Mute si Dr. Jerry.
Okay. I think I have to pick the line of Mr. Loreto when he said corporate responsibility. I think that is also an important element, not simply on the side of the government, but perhaps on the side of the private sector, because they cannot simply be benefiting from the work of our OFW workers, but at the same time, they also have the responsibility of really be the sole formator, and active collaborator in forming and developing our employees, or our workers. So whether single or family. So perhaps that's a very good idea in which we can take off. So whether you are in Metro Manila or in the province, I think they can pick that up, and on their own they can develop, and start from there. So I hope that will really push through after this kind of webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jerry. Ms. Eileen.
Yes, so thank you for this opportunity that we all have come together, from different fields, because our own priority or focus is that we want to help the families and the mother who leaves, or even the father who leaves. So it's good that we're together. We're all doing this, and hopefully it will push through, like what Dr. Jess said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eileen. And I also want to add to, actually this point is directed towards Ms. Carmelita and her team. I've looked at the social media videos. There's roughly 1,000 views right now. And we need more, OFWs to access such insightful opinions from our experts and from such dialogues that are so crucial right now. And I think this goes back to the point of Mr. Loreto. How accessible are these insights and these recommendations that our experts have highlighted? So without further ado, thank you so much for the opportunity to moderate. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Froilan, for that very good facilitation of our open forum. And thank you also to those who shared their questions and suggestions. Anyway, before we close, let us acknowledge the participants that we have today. I think earlier we have a lot, but some of them asked permission to leave because they had other meetings. But thank you very much for those who stayed. No, I think a lot of the participants today have been participants of our previous webinars. And thank you for attending all the seminars. And of course, in closing, we would like to thank, of course, Professor Oyi for her welcome remarks, and Sophia for her opening remarks and her sharing of her own experience. Our two distinguished speakers, Dr. J and Miss Eileen. So thank you very much for that very good presentations. And of course, Froilan, no, for facilitating our open forum, and everyone, no, who listened and who shared, who asked questions. No? So I think the discussions of the 4 webinars will be all very useful for policy recommendations to our governments, no? To the different agencies. And we're glad that Ms. Lucid is with us in, I think, all the webinars. And DSWD is one of the most important agencies of government, no, who are involved in this issue of migration. And then, of course, we had our social welfare attaches. Si Miss Annie just left a little earlier because he had a call, and she's our SWAT from Malaysia. And the previous days we had our SWAT from Riyadh and our welfare officer in Tokyo. So I think we're very glad that we had these 4 webinars. But of course, we also want to let you know that in November, as we mentioned last webinar, there will be a second series of webinars. And this time, we will be including the frontliners or our carers. So we said that we want to care for the caregivers. And I think this was mentioned also last webinar when our social welfare attaches, you know, said that they are also human and they need this and they need that. And even the welfare officer of Tokyo also said that she needs a refresher, and they too are stressed in their work and everything. So we thought that the second series of webinars will be like training workshops for our social workers, our guidance counselors, because children of OFWs are going to school, no? Of course, now it's online. So we also need to include the guidance counselors, the welfare officers, and of course the NGO workers, government agency workers. So we will be giving, this schedule is on the 3rd and 4th week of November. So we'll be sending invitations and the details later on. So again, thank you very much, everyone. Let's all keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Sir Lito, thank you ah.
Bye, Lito.
Dr. J, thank you po. Oo.
Thank you,
Miss
Mel.
Eileen, thank you.
Thank you po.
Oo. So, ulitin. Sir Lito. Oo. Hi, Cecil from Scalabrini Migration Center. Thank you. Meron, Miss Irene, thank you ah.
Thank you po.
Thank you din.
Tawagan ko siya.
Miss Carrie, thank you.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Miss Rose, thank you. So ulitin po.
Thank you po. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Mama Elena.
Then, bye.
Bye-bye po. Lance, thank you. Thank you, Luz. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mary Joy. Miss Lucid, thank you po. Miss Lucid.
Bye-bye po. Thank you.
Oo, ma'am. Paki-remind po si Sir
Thank you po.
Topper. Ma'am, paki-remind si Sir. Yung list po ng participants. Si Topper. Paki-remind po, ma'am.
Ay, oo nga. Hindi niya napadala. Oo nga eh. Kaya sabi
Oo
ko,
nga,
i-remind ko siya.
oo.
Padala.
We'll start
Opo.
preparing.
Para sa next
Oo.
natin.
Oo.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Miss Presentation.
Bye-bye po.
Presentation. Thank you po, Mama. Pasensya. Oo. So, ulitin, Mama. Bye-bye. Same, let's leave. Same.
Yes po.
Meron pa?
May utang pa kami.
Hello. Padala mo, ha?
Thank you.
Padala mo.
Sana all.
Hello. Bye-bye.
And bye-bye. Oo, okay. Congrats! 4 more to go.
Salamat.
Thank you po, Miss Nikki. Sir Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Ate Dali, tama mo na po ito.
Joy.
Ano ba ito siya?
137. Plus naman ang
Bye.